Hello, well, this would be day 6. This, in fact, is like a couple of days after the biscuit firing because it takes 2 days for the biscuit firing to cool down. And the first thing to do, as I said, is the glaze firing day. And the first thing to do is to put another layer of colour over it. Now I do this to emphasize the texture, and this is black really stains for some reason. I normally use black, but it should be a darker colour. Seems to work best. Oh, and there's still bits dropping out. Right, this is a Paran house, that's quite normally with the kind of Tuscan yellow base. The first thing I do is just put a quick wash of black over it. Now, I just wash it over the whole thing. I mean, it tends to result in something in a way that looks dirty, but the problem is that I think that without doing this, that it becomes a bit flat and bright and no character really. But that's my personal preference, but you know, this is very optional. But before I actually put the glaze on, I do this. This is because it is actually underglaze colour or body stain, does both jobs really. And it's not, oh, I can't remember the word. The word I was thinking of is it's not engobe. Now, the characteristic of engobe is that it can be put on before the biscuit firing or the glaze firing, and it's fine. Whereas where I discovered there's something I can do earlier, if I use slip over the second layer. Now this is one of these dishes just straight out of the biscuit firing with a yellow base or a Tuscan base, and this had a bright yellow base, and so what I've done is I've overpainted, you know, it doesn't have to be very precise, but with a particular blue, cornflower blue, they call it slip. And I'll show you, the next thing I'll do is brush this off. But if you put this on, if you paint something with just blue slip, even this slip, onto something biscuit fired, and then you put glaze on top of it, you just put the slip on and then you put glaze on, for some reason the glaze eats a lot of the colour. It just disappears into the glaze. I don't know why, it just goes. But if you use engobe, it stays and it's solid, but engobe is much more expensive. So that's all I know. So I don't use engobe anyway. But having coated this with black, I then it dries very quickly. I then wipe it off, but not a lot. So it needs to be only a damp cloth. And you see, when I wipe it off, the letters and the recesses, the lower parts, it stays in. Now the front is particularly important because I actually want the frames to be kind of white, and I want that blue colour to be reasonably bright. So sometimes you have to move it around, and where it's a fresher bit of cloth it takes more off. This is great. You don't want a lot, you don't want the black to be very dominant, because well, the one thing with glaze that happens is that glaze kind of, because it's glass, probably, is that it amplifies the colour. Whatever colour you've got here now, however faint it looks and watercoloury and everything, it'll be stronger when you put glaze on. And so I'm gonna, the roof doesn't matter, roof colour doesn't matter. Now what I will do is just to make sure that the white of the window stays fairly white, not completely, is I go over that and the shutters a little bit more with sort of cleanish bits of the cloth, just those bits, so that they stay bright and colourful. But you can see that it really highlights the text, which is very nice. Okay, and clean as we go, always. Now the next thing is with the other way, is if you use slip or as the second colour, is that I use this Scotch Brite or this Brillo pad, whatever, to rub this off, not with a cloth. Although you can do that a bit later as a finishing detail. Part of the reason for this is that I can reuse this powder as it comes off. It's not wasted. I do use both techniques. I use the cloth as well to clean it up a bit, you'll see. Okay, sorry, that was the phone ringing, which I had to answer. So you can see the dust goes off, and I'd want it whiter along these edges. In this case, I mean, I'm actually thinking in this case these bowls will be for Isola, and the kind of colours for Isola are blue, white and yellow. So that's why I'm doing it like this. And right, and then on the underside it's a bit easier to see. You see, as I rub it off, it stays in the lower parts. Again, I've got a little bit of texture in these bowls and there, and it's very nice to highlight it with this blue colour. And actually, though I've used black colour on the Piran house, black with the yellow, that's just because I always do that, but it could be any colour. Actually, as long as it's darker. Right, and you see here I haven't actually got much texture except the original texture of the clay, but it's still nice to accentuate it. And it's very interesting the way the colour underneath reacts with the colour on top. I mean, theoretically this is blue and yellow, so it should give some kind of psychological impression of green, really, if colour theory is correct. Not sure it does. I think you see blue and yellow in. Now, one of the nice things about the biscuit fired stuff is that it's considerably stronger and more robust and less fragile than just before you biscuit fire it, because that's terrible. It's really, really delicate. Now, what I can do is take this powder and put it back in the jar. Helps to make it last a lot longer, because you remember these powders are relatively expensive. So I'm not being mean, but it's silly to waste it. Right, so that goes back in there. And this one is, yes, I've labelled it cornflower blue, and it's a slip. Now, again, just to get it exactly how I like it, I can use, first of all, clean that off, but I can use a damp cloth to kind of fine tune this, because it looks like the blue is a little bit strong there now, and I can take off a bit more blue that way to expose the bright yellow underneath a bit more. It's difficult to kind of guess, but it's always a surprise when it comes out of the glaze firing. You never quite know how deep the colours are going to be and how strong. It's always exciting. It's one of the great things about ceramics, really, is that they're kind of, in a sense, there are no rules in ceramics, because there are just tendencies. Because everything is so different. I mean, even down to the acidity of your hands and your skin can make a difference. But I think that's fine. You know, that's nitpicking. But it's still, you get, people have different ways of working, and you can only say there is a tendency for clay to do this or clay to do that. But I think that's enough to allow the bright yellow to show through. Okay, so glazing. I'm having to re-record this because this camera seems to have a time limit, and I probably went on too long and it just automatically cut off. Anyway, so I'll just do one house now. Once you've got the house with the second colour on and wiped off and dried, which it does very quickly, so this nicely emphasises any relief or texture. Then the next thing to do is to put the glaze on. Now, I use this Colorobia HC0004 lead-free, super clear dipping glaze, it says, transparent. Now, obviously it's a dipping glaze, and I've tried that, and I don't like it so much. It's not practical for a lot of the things I make, but I like to brush it on, which is unusual because I think people spray or they pour. You can literally pour over it and back into the pot. But I mean, it's lead free, which has been, I'm not sure that that's important, because one guy in the business said to me the problem is that lead evaporates well before the limit of the glaze firing, 1000 degrees, whatever, so there shouldn't be any lead in it at all. But anyway, it seems to have caught on, and I brush, and being transparent I get away with it, because even if it is a bit uneven, it doesn't really show except in, you know, certain lights. The first thing about the glaze is that it will make all these colours stronger. They're quite sort of matte and muted and aquarelle, as we say, or watercolory at the moment. Quite nice actually, very matte. But what the glaze does, being a basically glass, it's a glass powder suspension in a liquid, in water, and basically what that does is that it kind of amplifies the colour, so whatever the colour is now, it'll be stronger after the glaze. So I decant this stuff, which, by the way, when you buy it, it's quite expensive, and they recommend that you maybe dilute it by about 10%, because it does sit a little bit thick. So this is what you do, and you don't brush it out, or well, when I brush anyway, because normally you wouldn't brush it, you would just pour it on and let it dry on there. So I just kind of, I use the brush to float the glaze on, like this, really. Put it on as thick as possible, and don't overbrush it, and it dries very quickly, almost instantly. And I like to put it on nice and thick, because despite being I'm somebody that likes matte, and I'm not a very glossy sort of person, I do accept over the years that ceramics particularly looks better when it's glazed. It's also stronger because it fires, I mean, it actually fires up to well, I fire to about 1020 degrees, and at about 700 degrees the powder, which is basically all that's left on there, melts and liquefies and turns into glaze, and then the remaining 300 degrees or so, it bonds with the fired ceramic, making it very strong. The combined of fusing of the glass and the ceramics is what gives it a lot of strength and opacity, in the sense that it won't absorb water after that, of course, where it's glazed. Now, in the first video I did actually do a dish which you can see in the background there as well, and I think I ran out of time basically. I think all that took too long, so I'll just do the house now. It does have a tendency, even though it's really nice glaze, the effect of it is that even though it doesn't really creep or run in the firing, it does settle quite flat. It's pretty good. And even that, you know, it's worth the extra money, I find. But you just imagine that you were dipping it, in a sense. Right, make sure you've done every bit. Doesn't matter if it looks a bit thick at some parts, they're a bit lumpy at some parts. Right, I blocked this out. I was going to say if it blocks out, it's quite a good idea to clear it, as I found recently. Although in the past I've not had any problems. If it looks like it's going to block out, then it doesn't really matter. If this stuff goes on too thick, where it does collect ridiculously thickly, it does go kind of a bit milky. So that's a downside, but I don't find that happens very often. And if I do thin it down, which I've done with this one by 10%, then it's not really a problem. Now, the only other thing that you have to do and it's very important before you put it in the kiln is to clean off the bottom, which I do just with the damp cloth. That's very easy, but I'm pretty thorough. Because this is where it's going to sit on the kiln shelf, and if any glaze gets on that, it'll stick and actually bond, and you'll need a kind of angle grinder to get it off, and you'll lose the kiln shelf or the piece or both. And the kiln shelves are quite expensive, so you don't really want to do that. In fact, everything can't be glazed without an unglazed part where it contacts the kiln. Even those plates, it only needs to be very thin. But you see, what would worry me is that the glaze might run down onto the kiln shelf, but it doesn't. This one never does, so it's okay. I don't have any problems with it. Now with these things, I find that to use a bigger brush like that is better over if you've got a large area, or that one. And these are pastry brushes. They're ideal, I find, for doing the larger areas. And then of course that needs cleaning off at the bottom as well. Now, after the glaze, there is a third firing. I mean, this is, like I said, this is day 6 or something. But after the glaze, then that's the third firing for me, which is the transfer firing. But of course I'll do a different video for that. And a lot of the things I make, I don't do that. Like the houses, I don't use transfers on. But the dishes and bowls I usually do. I don't leave them plain. But there you are, that's all cleaned off. Now I've got to do all the other ones. And then that's the other thing, when you stack the kiln, absolutely none of these items must touch any other, because they'll just fuse together. So that sometimes limits, you know, you can put more in a biscuit firing because stuff can touch each other, whereas on a glaze firing they can't.